Hey guys, it's Sagar, and in this video we are going to take a very detailed look at all the cameras on this Redmi K50i. In my full review, we saw that this is a very good overall phone, and in this one, let us see if its cameras are as good as the rest of the phone. Usually, I post these detailed camera reviews within the first week of getting a new phone, but ever since I got this phone, the weather conditions have been extremely overcast. I decided to wait for the weather to clear off so I could take image and video samples in various lighting conditions. Now I have over 100 image and video samples from all these cameras in various lighting conditions. But before we get to them, let us check out the cameras that we are working with. If you guys want to skip over this part, you can head straight to the image and video samples from the chapters on the timeline of this video. This Redmi K50i gets 4 cameras in total, 3 on its back and 1 at the front. The primary camera on its back gets a 64 megapixel GW1 sensor with f1.9 aperture. Next, we have the 8 megapixel camera with f2.2 aperture and 120° ultra-wide angle lens. And finally, there is a 2 megapixel sensor with f2.4 aperture and a macro lens. I personally feel that this camera is totally useless. The main camera can shoot 4K 30fps and 1080p 30 and 60fps videos. The ultra-wide camera can shoot 1080p 30fps videos. You cannot switch the lenses while shooting videos. You will have to choose the lens that you want to shoot with before you hit the record button. At the front, we get a 16 megapixel selfie camera with f2.5 aperture, and this camera can record videos at 1080p 30fps. With the camera specs taken care of, let us now get to the image and video samples, starting with the images which I took during the daytime with the main rear camera. Fortunately, I was able to take a few images when the sun was shining nice and bright. It's a 64 megapixel sensor, but these are 16 megapixel binned images. There seem to be plenty of details in these shots from this far. But when you zoom in, it is clear that Redmi is applying a lot of sharpening to these images. It is not that big of an issue if you don't zoom in on these images so much. But if you're someone who likes to crop in or zoom in on most of your images, then your images might not look the most natural. Here is how the main camera performs in overcast or diffuse lighting conditions. Again, the images look good from so far, but these images are in fact a bit softer. There is also a bit of noise in them when the light is not adequate, but looking at the overall image and not zooming in too much, I think they look pretty good. Now, one of the things that I am really happy about is the natural color reproduction that this camera has. As you can see, the colors in these shots are not overly saturated. There is also no extra contrast like we have seen in some of the other Redmi and Xiaomi phones, which is really appreciated. There is no weird shift in color temperature and white balance of these shots, and the colors also look really close to how they were in real life. So overall, I am happy with the colors that this Redmi K50i produces. Here are two images compared side by side with and without the HDR mode turned on. You can see that the HDR mode brought back so many more details from the shadows of the trees. The effect of HDR mode is seen more prominently in this sort of images. With the HDR mode turned on, the main camera brought back a ton of information from the shadows while preserving the brighter areas between the clouds as well. Here's another good HDR shot, where the phone did really well and did not let the sun blow up the sky, and at the same time it did not let the shadows appear too dark. These images too look good from so far. But if you zoom in even a bit, we again see that there are barely any details there. In a way, the HDR mode on this phone works really well and takes care of the shadows and highlights. But in this process, these images lose out on a lot of details. So again, the images look good as far as you don't zoom in on them. Once you start zooming in, they quickly start falling apart. Coming to the close-up shots. The main camera on this Redmi K50i is quick at setting the focus on any nearby object, and its minimum focusing distance is also pretty good. As you can see in these shots, the subject is in perfect sharp focus, and thanks to the wide f1.9 aperture, the background gets a very smooth bokeh. Again, the colors in these close-up shots are very close to how the scene looked in real life, so I'm really happy with these close-up shots. There are certain cases where you might want to get even more closer to your subject to maybe show some more minute details, and for that purpose, this K50i gets a separate macro lens. This lens will get you very close to your subject, but unfortunately, it only has a 2 megapixel sensor behind it, so there are barely any details in these shots. And as you can tell, the colors also look very weird. You get better looking macro shots if you zoom in digitally 1.5 to 2 times with the main image sensor. Here are a few images that I shot with the macro lens compared with the 2x digitally zoomed ones from the main camera. You can see for yourself that digitally zoomed in ones look much better, have more details and lot less noise, and these ones also have much better looking colors. Xiaomi and Redmi phones had such amazing macro cameras last year, and it is really sad to see them go back to these useless 2 megapixel macro cameras. If you want to take macro shots, instead of switching to the macro mode, just digitally zoom in on your subject to get better results. The next camera at the back is the ultra-wide one, and here is how much more of the scene it will let you get in the shot compared to the primary one. This wide lens will let you show the scale of things and if you want to be creative, you can also use it to capture a different perspective of the same scene. All of this is good, but this lens just gets an 8 megapixel sensor behind it, so there are not enough details in these wide shots. The wide lens on most of the phones captures softer shots towards the edges, but the entire wide shot is completely soft on this Redmi K50i. You can use it in some situations where you want to show scale of things or to capture bigger scenes if you don't have any space to move back. But don't use this lens too often unless you are fine with having a lot of blurry or soft looking images in your camera roll. All of the images that we saw from the main camera till now have been 16 megapixel binned ones. And now here are how the 64 megapixel shots look when compared against the 16 megapixel ones. The only difference that you might see from this one is that how both of them have captured a different dynamic range. The 16 megapixel shots show a much better dynamic range, but in the 64 megapixel ones, shadows are too dark and the highlights are blown out. Other than this, if you want to see the difference in the details between these shots, you will have to zoom in at least 4 to 5 times. When zoomed in so far, we can easily make out more details in the 64 megapixel shots. These shots would look even better in bright sunny lighting conditions. You can switch to the high resolution mode when you know that you will want to crop in a particular part of the image later on. If not, then I feel it is best to stick to the default 16 megapixel binned mode for most of your shots. First, these images give you much better dynamic range, and second, you will notice the extra details in the 64 megapixel shots only when you zoom in 4 to 5 times. Plus, these images are also 3 to 4 times bigger in terms of file size, which fills up the internal storage on your phone really fast. Coming to the portrait shots. Any phone needs to do these few things right in order to take best looking portrait shots. Capture good looking colors and skin tones, accurately detect the edges of the subject and blur rest of the background gradually, and make sure that the subject is sharp. The Redmi K50i gets most of these things right. It is very good at detecting the edges and separating the subject from its background, and the overall colors and skin tones also look very natural. Thankfully, it doesn't add a ton of contrast or crush the shadows in these shots like some of the other Redmi and Xiaomi phones do. All of this is good and makes these portrait shots look very natural. But if you zoom in on these shots even a bit, you will notice that the subjects are a bit soft and don't have enough details in them. I was holding the phone very steady while taking these shots, but the subjects still appear a bit blurry in these portrait shots. As I said before, it is only visible if you zoom in on these shots. If you zoom out, then these portrait shots will look really good. I know I'm one of the very few people who does this, but I love taking portrait shots of objects. This K50i is surprisingly accurate at detecting the edges of complex objects. For some reason, the subjects in these shots are a lot sharper, unlike with the portraits of people. I think if Redmi can refine the portrait mode with a few updates when there are people in the shot, this could be a really good phone for taking portrait shots. Let us now move on to the images which are taken in artificial and lower lighting conditions. The main camera on this K50i gets a big image sensor and wide aperture, but it doesn't have OIS, so you need to have very steady set of hands to take good images in these lighting conditions. If you have steady pair of hands, the indoor and low light shots on this phone will look really good. The colors in these low lighting conditions are still natural as they were in real life. There is a lot of noise in these images, but if you don't zoom in, that won't bother you too much. In even lower lighting conditions, you can switch to the night mode. Now this mode won't necessarily add a lot of light to these images, but it definitely adds more details to your shots and handles the exposure from the light much better. The night mode also helps to keep the noise in check in these images to a large extent. Now these images are good, but you should know that they are at par with the images from other phones in this price range. Actually, there are a few phones in this price range which can take even better images than this in artificial or lower lighting conditions. You can use the wide lens in lower lighting conditions as well, but as you can see, its images are nowhere as sharp or detailed as the ones from the main camera. There is a ton of noise in the wide shots as well. You can switch to the night mode on the wide lens as well, and those images look so much better. Everything looks sharper, there is less noise, and these night mode wide shots actually look usable. All that being said, I won't say that this is the best camera in lower light, because let's face it, it is not. But it is still doing a really good job for its price. If you are going to buy this phone, you should know that these cameras take decent looking images when the light goes down. How it compares to the competition is a question for another video. That brings us to the front facing camera. It's a 16 megapixel selfie camera, but the details don't seem to be there. And sadly, this phone seems to suffer from the high contrast issue that we have seen on selfie cameras of so many Redmi phones before. The images also seem to have extra sharpness added to them, which make them look a bit unnatural. And even with the beauty mode turned off, the faces still look a bit soft. The skin tones don't look all that bad in well-lit conditions, but these selfies definitely need a lot of help with updates. The edge detection is good in portrait selfies, but they still don't look all that good. The dynamic range takes a big hit while taking portrait selfies, and again there is a lot more contrast in these images. These selfies are not the worst looking, but there are definitely phones in this price range which can take better looking selfies than this K50i. Here's a video from the front facing camera of the Redmi K50i. You can see how it is handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure and stabilization when I am walking around with it. For the videos, the main camera can shoot 4K videos at 30 fps. By default, these 4K videos are not stabilized. There is an option to turn on electronic stabilization, but when you do that, the videos are heavily cropped in. That being said, just look at how stable these videos look once I turn on the stabilization. If you don't want this heavy crop in your videos, you can switch to the 1080p 30 fps video mode, and these videos get electronic stabilization by default. If you look at the video carefully, you can easily spot jitters and shakes with each step which I am taking, and this doesn't really look good. So the video performance of this phone is not the best, but if you have steady pair of hands, it can still get the job done. With that, we have seen over 100 image and video samples from all these cameras. Like the cases with most of the phones, the rear main camera does all of the heavy lifting. It is still a Samsung image sensor backed by the ISP on Mediatek Dimensity processor, both of which are not known for delivering best results. If it came with either a Snapdragon processor or a Sony image sensor, the images could have been much better, but this is where we are. All that being said, I think I was a bit too harsh on the cameras on this phone in its full review. The camera is not that bad, but you should have real expectations from it. The overall phone is really great for the price, and compared to that, the cameras are not on the same level. It did get better from when I first got this phone little over 2 weeks back, but you should know that this is not a camera first phone. If camera is your topmost priority, then I would say you should look at some of the other phones in and around this price range. If you are buying this Redmi K50i, you will be getting a great overall phone in this price with an above average camera. I feel like it is a good overall package. After looking at all these image and video samples, what do you guys feel about the cameras on this Redmi K50i? Let me know in the comments. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.